Look at the skeletal system. Today we'll look mostly at an overview of the entire skeletal system, and then we'll delve into each particular section and specific bones in the next week or so. So part of the skeletal system includes cartilages. There are cartilages on the end of many long bones called articulating cartilage that we talked about when we talked about tissues. And there are other locations where we find cartilage within the skeletal system. So skeletal cartilage is made up of a highly resilient mottled cartilage, mostly water, no blood vessels, no nerves. The layers would include perichondrium, which is a connective tissue layer surrounding the cartilage like a girdle. That helps the cartilage resist outward expansion. This is where there are blood vessels that provide nutrients for the cartilage itself. And the cartilage itself is made up of chondrocytes, which are cells that are encased in small cavities called lacunae, which we also saw when we talked about tissues in bone. And in that lacunae is a jelly-like extracellular matrix. Cartilage, as we said before, comes in three different types: hyaline, elastic, and fibro. Hyaline provides support, flexibility, and resilience. It is the most abundant of the three. Has collagen fibers only. We find it at articulate cartilage, which we'll see at joints, costal cartilages, which connect our ribs, respiratory in our larynx, and nasal cartilage at the end of our nose. Elastic cartilage is very similar to hyaline cartilage, but it also has elastic fibers, and we find elastic cartilage in our external ear, in our epiglottis. Third type is fibrocartilage that has thick collagen fibers, great tensile strength. You can pull on it without it breaking. The meniscus of the knee, the vertebral discs would be examples of fibrocartilage. Cartilage grows in two ways: appositional and interstitial. The appositional growth, the cartilage-forming cells in the perichondrium secrete matrix against the external face of the existing cartilage, and then new matrix would be laid down on the surface of the cartilage. Interstitially, the chondrocytes within the lacunae will divide and secrete new matrix, and that will expand the cartilage from within. New matrix being made within the cartilage itself, so on the surface and within the cartilage structure itself. Eventually, calcification of cartilage can occur during normal bone growth in youth. It's going to be how we make long bones longer. We'll see later on in this chapter. But it also can occur as old age occurs. But it's important to note that hardened cartilage is not the same as bone tissue. It's not osseous tissue. All right, let's talk about the function of bones. And the major functions are, there's 7 of them, are support, protection, movement, mineral growth factor and storage, blood cell formation, triglyceride storage, hormone production. So support for body and soft organs. It also provides protection. Parts of our skeleton are going to be more involved in protection than movement. Our central nervous system is encased in bones that have very little movement, if any, of them. Movement, bones will provide levers for our muscular system to move us, to manipulate our environment. Bones are made of minerals like calcium and phosphorus, and they can be used as reservoirs for calcium and phosphorus. Having low calcium is not good for your bones, but low calcium is going to cause problems in other locations more immediately, like nerve transmission, muscle contraction. So we need to have those minerals available. You may not realize it, but all of your blood cells, red and white, platelets in addition to that, are formed within the marrow spaces of your bone. This process is called hematopoiesis. In some marrow locations, we store triglycerides, especially as adults. That fat can be used for an energy source. And bone tissue does produce some hormones, including osteocalcin, which is secreted to regulate insulin secretion, glucose levels, and metabolism. Now, we're going to talk about the general classification of bones. Again, we're not going to go into specific bones in this chapter, but we are going to talk about some general types of bones. There are approximately 206 bones in the human skeleton, and they are divided into two groups based on their location: the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton is the long axis of our body. It would include our skull, our vertebral column, and our rib cage. Coming off of that would be the appendicular skeleton. That would be the bones of the upper and lower limbs, arms and legs, and the girdles that hold those bones in position to the axial skeleton. Here they are shown again. We can also classify bones based on their shapes, and there are four basic shapes of bones. There are long bones, which are longer than they are wide. These are generally found in our limbs. I just want to make clear that it's not really the length of the bone that makes it a long bone. You can have short long bones as long as they are longer than they are wide. So in our fingers, we would have very short long bones. Short bones, on the other hand, are cube-shaped, roughly the same width and height. We find those in our wrists and ankles. We also find them in what are known as sesamoid bones, which are bones that form within tendons. Your kneecap, your patella, is a good example of a sesamoid bone. The sesamoid bones and the short bones do vary in number and size in different individuals. There are more sesamoid bones in some people than there are in others. Flat bones would be thin, flat, and usually slightly curved. Your sternum, your scapula, your ribs, most of your skull bones are flat bones. And then if it doesn't fit into long, short, or flat, we've got our catch-all category of irregular bones, complicated shapes. Vertebrae are our best example of irregular bones. So here we have a long bone, which is a long bone, but it's definitely longer than it is wide, compared to a short bone, which is difficult to show in two-dimensional drawing, but it is basically cube-shaped. Here we have a flat bone in our sternum. It is less curved than some of the other flat bones we find in our head, and the vertebrae, which really doesn't fit